Welcome back to America Decides. The chair of the Democratic National Committee, Ken Martin is his name if you have it memorized. It says one of the party's vice chairs, David Hogg, has to, quote, make a decision between serving as a vice chair of the DNC or carrying out his efforts with a PAC, a super PAC, to primary House Democratic incumbents. Listen.
I've said to him, if you want to challenge incumbents, you're more than free to do that, but just not as an officer of the DNC, because our job is to be neutral arbiters. We can't be both the referee and also the player at the same time.
So we're going to do a little bit of Major's Reading Corner here for a second. But before I do the Major's Reading Corner, let me introduce our political panel. Hyma, formerly served as the director of the Office of the DNC chair. That's really helpful for this conversation. And Kevin Sheridan, spokesperson for the Republican National Committee and a senior advisor to the 2012 Romney-Ryan presidential campaign. All right, Major's Reading Corner. All right, first, Ken Martin wrote something for Time magazine. I want to quote from it. In the coming days, I will introduce a new slate of structural reforms that codify these principles of neutrality, which you just heard Ken Martin refer to, and fairness, it goes on to say, into our official party rules, requiring all party officers, myself included, to remain neutral in all Democratic primaries. Well, if you saw David Hogg on this program last week, and I'm pretty confident you did, a lot of attention paid to it, he said this on social media. They, meaning the DNC, are trying to change the rules because I'm not currently breaking them. As we're seeing law firms, tech companies, and so many others bowing to Trump, we all must use whatever position of power we have to fight back. And that's exactly why I'm doing. Thus concludes Major's Reading Corner. All right, Hyma.
Yes, sir.
What's going to happen?
Look, two things are going to happen. Ken Martin, who is the new chairman, has been hell-bent on codifying these rules for a long time. Even during 2016, you remember the party was going through something similar. And so he's going to get those rules passed, and he's going to codify some neutrality clause in the bylaws. That's going to happen. The second thing that's going to happen, David Hogg is not going to be taken and removed as the vice chair. I don't think Ken Martin or any of the other officers have any intention to do that. He's duly elected. In order for that to happen, the Rules and Bylaws Committee of the DNC would have to initiate a process that will allow for the members to vote on him being taken down or taken out of that seat, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think Ken Martin wants to build a party that's going to be structurally strong, but it has people like David Hogg, who's a young man and he's very good on social media, who can go out there and campaign for the candidates that we already have.
Can a national party be structurally strong if one of its vice chairs is actively raising and spending money against House Democratic incumbents?
I don't think so, and I think that's what Ken Martin was trying to say. I think David Hogg's got to decide if you want to be the vice chair of this party at the most critical time in a very long time for the Democratic Party, or do you want to go outside and spend money to primary people who we don't even know if incumbents are going to be the people who are elected just yet, and so we're not sure that his efforts are even going to be impactful.
Kevin, I had Major's Reading Corner. You'll be in Schadenfreude Corner right over there, right? You're just like, go at it, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. If they want to take $20 million off the table and spend it on inter-party fights, that's music to every Republican's ears. What confuses me is how this got so far, how he was able to roll this out completely publicly and not have the backing of the rest of the committee or the chairman.
It's a good question, isn't it? It's a good question, right? What's your sense?
Look, I think he went over his skis, and I think David Hogg, if you guys know David Hogg and watched him over the last few years, he's untethered by anything like a party apparatus. And so I think the question mark was, how did he get elected? And he was duly elected, but I think if we had an issue with him, we should have probably done a little bit more to run somebody against him. But he was elected by the party, so.
And when these party changes, these rule changes on neutrality happen, if David Hogg proceeds, that would then give someone the means by which to knock him out,
to initiate the process, yeah. And so there's a process for everything in the Democratic Party. Like a little bit more. There's a plan for it. And so there will be a process initiated, and then they would have to vote on taking him out or not, and then vote on a new chair. Or I think there's maybe a clause where the chairman can appoint an interim vice chair.
But if he digs in, I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to actually remove him?
I don't think that's going to happen right now, but I do think that Ken Martin would love to just move past this and get David Hogg back on the train and just get the train moving in the same direction.
Kevin, we talked about this with Finn Gomez at the top of the show. There's Fox poll numbers that are negative for the president. He hates those numbers. Denounce Fox and their pollster. He's done that before. But those numbers are not wildly inconsistent with Reuters numbers, Economist YouGov numbers. We'll have a poll out next week. I promise you that, folks. And Reuters polling. What would you say the trajectory is now for Trump, and how concerned should the White House be?
Honestly, I think this term he's going to run his presidency the way he wants it, and I don't think he's as poll sensitive as we all think he is. I don't think he's headline sensitive for sure, but it's the tariffs that are doing it. Obviously, as soon as the tariffs went on, his numbers dropped, and that was foreseeable. His base is still strongly behind him, but the independents and the people that got him over the top do not like these tariffs, and that's at any time he could take them off. He could cut deals. He could start announcing deals. So we're going to see the markets go back up. His numbers will go back up.
Hold on, Hyma, because on this program about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, you said, all right, Trump says he's talking.
Yeah.
Let's have some deals. You just heard Justin Wolfers, I hope, from Michigan say we already have. I can't do it. Anyway, we have a deal with South Korea. Talking to the South Koreans about another deal impresses no one.
Well, this is all headlines. He just wants good headlines or things that he can say he did to fix our trade imbalance. And if there's a ring of truth to it, then he'll stick to that and he'll make that his platform going into the summer. But yeah, they've got to start announcing some deals pretty soon. It's getting late.
You want to jump in,
I
Hyma,
think
please.
what moderates and independents are saying is the uncertainty is killing business, and it's been very, very bad for the past few weeks. And then secondly, if Donald Trump wants to have good headlines, he should do things to lower costs to make people's lives better, which he said he would do. And I'm not saying he can't do it. I have all the faith in the world that a president of the United States of America can make people's lives better, but he hasn't proven that yet in the last 95 days.
Well, gas prices are down.
Yeah, Joe Biden said that.
They're down from where they were a year ago. Over a month, they're up 5 cents. But
$64 a barrel is not. That's pretty.
No, I know.
Reasonable.
And I think President Trump should be nervous to fall into that same trap that Joe Biden fell in just a year or 2 years ago, talking about prices going down. People don't feel that yet. I think until people feel that, that's still going to be a big question mark for the Republican Party.
Yeah, when President Trump says, as he did again today, that egg prices are down 87%, Kevin, that's not true in any grocery store in America. They're not even down 20% in any grocery store in America. Retail prices.
Yeah, I haven't checked the price of eggs.
That's the only Republican in America who hasn't checked the price of eggs.
It sounded reasonable to me when I heard it.
I went yesterday, so it's true.
Hyma Moore, Kevin Sheridan, who doesn't check the price of eggs. Thank you. We'll have you back just because of that.